Hello everyone, welcome back. This is another Stitch with me. We're going to be working on Zen again today, and I have actually moved the what am I thinking? I've moved the hoop. So I've moved the cross stitch pattern in the hoop so we could work on her face and her hair. I'm going to be using just this colour thread throughout this whole cross stitch stitch with me because it seems to pick up better on the camera. There was a comment on my last stitch with me about the camera not being very sharp. Now I'm not sure if it was the time of day that I was recording or my lights were too high, because I have actually got the lights lower in this stitch with me than I did on the previous one, but I was also stitching mostly with yellows in the last one as well, and I think it might have just been a combination of everything, so I've decided just to stick with the dark thread for this video, just to see how it looks, and her whole face needs doing anyway. There's not that much progress that's been done on this, and I thought, well, the background's a little bit boring to keep stitching as well, so this one is going to be fairly long, so I hope you've got some sort of crafting stuff with you to keep yourself busy and to just listen along. In the last stitch with me, I said we were going to talk about my house moves, so I hope you're ready to listen to all of that. Before we get into that story, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming back and all subscribing. It's been absolutely amazing to have so many lovely people come over and watch my videos. It's been really, really great. So I have got myself a coffee. What else have I got? I haven't got any notes, because all I know is that we're talking about the house today. You might see my son every now and again in the top corner, because he was rolling around the floor while I was doing this. I actually moved rooms and I went into the living room to film this one, because I thought it could have been the lighting that was causing the issues before. So I decided to just go into a different room and see if that helped. It actually helped me. I would say it helped me because of my back. When I've done the other stitch with me's, I'm doing it at a certain angle because I'm always worried that you can't see the camera. So I have made sure I was on the sofa and I was comfortable this time, and that helped me an awful lot with my back. So that was great. The only issue was that my nose and my glasses kept popping in and out of view, so I had to cut quite a fair bit out, because I did an awful lot of stitching actually when it came to doing this video. I think I had about an hour and a half worth of footage once I'd finished. It was just I cut so much of my head out that it came to about 46 minutes or so. I'm just going to have a bit of my coffee. I hope the music in the background is okay for you, and it's not too loud. Excuse me. If it's too loud, just let me know, and I will try and keep it a bit lower in the future. Also, the intro, I don't think it's that great. I need to work on a new intro. I'm trying to figure out ways to make one, but I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I do want an intro so my videos don't start the minute you press on them. It give you a bit of time to get ready for the video, if that makes sense, even if it's just like 10 seconds. But I don't know what I want in the intro, so if anyone has any tips or anything on how to make them, that would be perfect, because the one I made literally took 5 seconds and it's not great. Okay, so let's just get straight into it with the story of the house moving, really, I suppose. So since the age of 17, I have always had a council house. Now, if you're in the UK, or not the UK, sorry, if you're not in the UK and yet anywhere else, basically we call a council house is a house that's owned by the local council, and you rent it out at a cheaper price. So it's cheaper rent than it is from a private landlord, which in this day and age is amazing that I'm able to get my rent cheaper than... I honestly think if I was in a private landlord's house, there's no way that I could get the house that I've got. That's the type of thing. So I've never left the council, because they have this weird thing that if you leave, it's hard to get back into a council house, because the idea behind them is they are there for the most needed people in the UK. So I got my first place when I was 17, and I was pregnant with my second child. I had my kids quite young. I had my daughter at 16, and then I had my son, my middle son, at 18. And then there was a bit of a gap, and I had my last child at 25. So when I was pregnant at 17, I got myself a flat. It was it a flat? Yeah, it was like a two bed flat for me, my child, and their father. When the relationship kind of broke down, I ended up moving into what we call a hostel. It's like an emergency accommodation, a bit like a bed and breakfast. So I moved in there while I was still pregnant, and the council, what they do is they put you on high, low or medium priority. Because I had nowhere to go and I'd split up with my partner at the time, they put me on high priority because I was pregnant. So thankfully, we were so lucky. I mean, nowadays you probably this wouldn't happen, but within 3 months of me living in that hostel, they gave me a 3-bedroom house, and the rent was, I honestly can't remember the rent at the time, but it was a new build house. It was a brand new built house, and it had a communal garden, so you had to share the garden with everybody, and it was like houses in a circle, and all the backs of the houses backed on to this circle, and in the middle of it there was a park like frame for the children. And when I first moved there, I thought, well, this is great. I thought, I mean, I was happy with anything at the time because I had nowhere to live. So I stayed there for a good couple of years. I'm trying to think how many years exactly. It must have been about 4. And basically, when you want to move out of a council house, the only way that they will move you is if you decide to swap with another council tenant. So we can swap houses, but we can't go to the council and say, find me a new house. It doesn't work that way. You have to, what we call a mutual exchange, where you swap houses, but you have to be eligible for the house that you're swapping for. So I can't, say if I've got my 3-bed house, I can't then move into a 1-bed flat when I've got 2 children to look after, because I'll look at my circumstances and go, what are you doing? But at the same time, a single person can't move out of a 1-bedroom flat into a 3-bedroom house because they've got nobody else to fill them rooms, if that makes sense. So you have to be eligible for the house that you want to swap with. Excuse me. So there's websites and local Facebook groups and communities and all that type of stuff. So I decided that I wanted to move. I wanted to be closer to family. The only downside with being in a council house is you don't get to pick where it is. You kind of get given what you're given, and you take it and you like it and that's it. But the rule that they have is you have to live there for 1 year before you can swap. So I'd been there for about 4 years, and I was getting really down, and I wanted to be closer to family because I had 2 children and I was by myself. The father of the 2 children was kind of in and out of their life. I went through domestic violence with him, and it was an awful, awful time. I won't go into it, but I'd say all of that came to an end when I was about 19, just before my 20th, like end of my 19th year. So by that point, I was ready to go. He was out of the picture, thank God. and I was ready to move back to family to be with them for support, because a lot of the domestic violence happened because I was isolated, if that makes sense. I had nobody else around me, and it was just the situation was easier for him. So I moved back, and I actually swapped with my sister. So my sister, my oldest sister, she came round one day and she said, I really don't like where I live. And where she was currently was where I wanted to be. Not in the exact area, but in the town, if that makes sense. So she had a 3-bedroom house, the same as me, but she liked my house because mine was a new build. It had an ensuite shower in the main bathroom. It was big bedrooms, and I actually really didn't like it. I don't like the layout of these new builds, but when I got it, obviously I was ecstatic. I had a brand new house and I was like so grateful for it. But over time, I kind of missed places like my dad's house, where they're an old council, because my dad's house was built for the London overspill during the war, and they ended up just being like, they were supposed to be temporary houses that ended up being permanent houses, and it was this massive estate, and I've lived there pretty much for half of my life, and I just like the layout of the houses in the area because I know everybody there, and she had one of these houses. So I said, well, why don't we swap? Because I'm looking to go back to where she was, and I've been trying to swap for a couple of weeks, but nobody wanted my house because it didn't have a private garden. So as I said, you had the communal area, and I did get problems with other people's kids coming in. They would just walk into the house when I had the patio doors open, because it was hot weather, in the summertime. Kids would just walk in. You had no privacy there. They would just walk in and say, I'm hungry, I want a drink. And I'd be like, well, go back to your house. But yeah, I didn't like that. She didn't seem to mind it, so we did a swap between us. The house that she gave me needed an awful lot of work. And this becomes a recurring thing throughout my houses, that they all need a lot of work. So we did the swap. You do have to pay, and it's a little bit hectic because the money and everything's fine, because they do gas and electric checks and make sure that the house is safe. Somebody comes around and does an inspection, for asbestos and things like that. So that's fine. It's not that expensive. I think it's about £250. But the move-in day, you have to agree on a move-in day, and at any point before that move-in day, before I physically have the other person's keys to the house in my hand, they can decline and change their mind. So it is really stressful. Now, the first time I did it, I was doing it with my sister, so I knew she wouldn't back down. But I have heard stories where people have packed everything, changed their kids' schools and ready to go, and then the person on the day has said, I'm not doing it. And that would be so scary for me. But you have to do it all on the same day. So you and the other person have to swap on the same day. So it is a little bit hectic. You have to make sure that you've got everything out of there in one day. And you're going backwards and forwards. There's people in the way. They're bringing their stuff in as you're taking your stuff out. And it's not a fun time. But thankfully, because I was with my sister, we shared a van and we did backwards and forwards trips. It took us all day to do that. Sorry if you can hear Chubbs. She is fast asleep. She's not in the same room as me, but she is fast asleep. So, I moved into her house. It needed an awful lot of work, as I said. When I got there, she didn't tell me that the gas wasn't working, so I had no hot water or heating. There was a leak in the boiler. The house was an absolute tip, it was a rough house. She never wanted to live there, so she never done anything to the house. She never did any repairs or anything like that. And before her... I just remembered what happened to the house before she got it. So the only reason why she got that house is because she was separating from her partner, and he owned his own home, and she went to the council and said, I need a place to stay. And they basically said, here's a house, take it or leave it. This house was horrific when she moved in, because I remember going around there and helping. And basically the person that had lived there before did extra activities, extra adult activities as a job, and she had set fire to the living room ceiling. I don't know how. She'd set fire to the living room ceiling. There was locks on every door, and it actually did really upset me going in there, because I found out later on that she had children there and that they'd been taken away. But the house was absolutely, disgusting. And I remember going around there when my son was a newborn, just helping her clean this house. And I don't know if it's because she got in there and it was such a state that she just didn't want to do anything to it, so she just left it, or whether she just never wanted to be there in the first place. But I mean, even the garden, it had a neighbour on each side of the house, right? And because that house was empty for quite a while, excuse me, because the house was empty for quite a while, the neighbours decided to redo their gardens, but also in that meantime, while they were redoing the gardens, they dumped all of the rubbish into our back garden. So there was like a hill in the middle of the garden, and it wasn't a big garden, it was a small garden. They made like a mound of mud and rubbish and debris and glass, and then it started growing over with grass, and we just had this huge hill. So that all had to be dug out. It was a nightmare, that house. It had, I don't know if people in the US have this, but it had this wood chip wallpaper throughout the entire house. And basically what this is it's wood paper with chips of wood inside it. And it's very, very thick wallpaper. And it's what they put up. Councils used to put it up in houses that have really bad walls. So instead of re-skimming them or refilling them, they would just put this wood chip wallpaper up, and that thing could hold up anything. That stuff could hold anything, but you try and get it back off your walls, and it is an absolute nightmare. Now, this house had it everywhere. Up the stairs, in the hallways, every single room, and I hated it. So I made the decision to, rip it all off while I was there. I did a lot of work to that house. I was there for about 6 years. I tried to make it as much as I could my own, but the only downside to living there was the neighbours. Now, there was a couple of neighbours on either side of me that were really, really rough. One of them was doing things that they shouldn't have been doing and selling things that they shouldn't have been selling, and my kids and her kids ended up fighting all the time. They used to walk past my garden and throw stones at the kids while they were playing on the trampoline. It weren't a nice area. So I was just like, I've had enough. When my son Harrison was born, because he was born there, when he was born, I started thinking about things a little bit differently. And I was just like, I really don't want to be here anymore. We couldn't park. The house was nowhere near our car. So it was very difficult. You had to walk down alleyways around the houses, leave the car in this parking space with everybody else's cars, and that used to worry me in case they get burnt out, because that was a normal thing, cars being set on fire and things like that. I had someone try and break into the back of the house at one point when my fence blew down. That was it. My back fence blew down in one bad storm. The entire thing just fell down, and someone tried to break into the back of my house. It was just not a nice place to be. So I then started thinking about moving again. Now, my family are a bit strange, my dad's side. I love them to bits, but they are the type of family that are very, very close to me. And the minute I say something like, I'm going to move, excuse me. The minute I say something like, I'm going to move house, all hell breaks loose. You know, they think I'm moving to Australia or something, like I'm never going to see them again. So they all panic. So I told them that I was thinking about moving, and they were not happy. But I really, really struggled to get someone to move into that house because of where it was, because there was no car park, because of the neighbours. The inside of the house was fine. I'd done such a good job. Like, I'm not just saying that because it's me. Like, I think personally I did such a good job with what little I had. You know, me and my dad did so much to that house, and I think that's another reason why he got so annoyed when I moved, because he's like, oh, you always do this, all of you, because he's got 3 daughters, all 3 of us tend to do up other houses and then move into another bad house again. So he did get frustrated with me, but I would have stayed there, I think, if it weren't for the people that lived around me. So eventually because it took me quite a while, if I remember. It took me ages to find anywhere. Everyone kept saying no. And in the end, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to make my own Facebook group because I'm sick of this. I was finding it really difficult to actually find people to even talk to, because there is council websites that you can look at, and they post pictures of the houses and they tell you what they want. And the people on there never reply. They're terrible. Like, I don't know if it's the website's fault that they just don't notify people when they've got a message, or if people just generally don't reply. So I decided to make my own Facebook group. You know, I was sick of it. I was like, that is it. I am moving out of this house, and when I want to do something, I will do it, and I'm determined, and I won't stop until it's done. So I made my own Facebook group. It now has just over 2 or 3,000 members, because it's still going. I left it up. And I managed to find somebody. Well, what happened was we ended up doing a 3-way swap. So with the council, you can also do as many multiple swaps as you want. So say somebody wants my house, but I don't want theirs. I want another person's house, and that other person wants the house that belongs to the person that wants my house. We can do it that way. But it is dangerous. You can have as many multiple people involved as you want. I think I was told that the biggest they've seen is an 8-way swap. So 8 people moved at the same time. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the carnage? But we did a 3-way swap. Because one woman... The woman that I was going to, her property, she wanted to be in the middle of nowhere. And the woman that wanted mine was in the middle of nowhere, but wanted to be closer to the schools. So it just helped, and it worked out brilliantly. Anyway, we did that. We moved just on the outside of the town that I'm in now. And I haven't moved from a different town my entire life. So I've been in this town since forever. So I moved on the outskirts of the town, and it was a really, really posh little village. The house was a new build. It was an absolute state again. I don't know what this woman had done to the house, but there was handprints of kids' paint all over the walls. You know, it was rough. She hadn't looked after it. She had actually damaged this new build, and she was the first person, I believe, in the house. She was either the first or the second person to live there since it had been built. And she had trashed this house. There was holes in doors, which I'm surprised it even got accepted to move, because if there's too much damage to the property, the council usually say, no, you can't move, fix the problems, and then you can. I mean, they don't say anything about decoration or people's living, like the way people live with clutter and things like that. But if it's actual property damage, they will then turn around and say, look, you need to fix this before you move. But her council was different. She had a different council. So my council would not have approved her. But because I was moving into it, there was nothing they could say. So her council approved it. They didn't care. They let her do it. And this house was atrocious. I think No, actually, that wasn't as bad as this one. I'd say it's the second worst house I've been in. And it was just disgusting. It was so much damage done, especially to things like the garden, that her kids had buried things like knives and wrenches and toys and all sorts in there. And there was just things like paint all over the place, where they just didn't bother. So we lived there for... Oh, I'm trying to think. It was a while. Definitely was a while. It must have been about 6 years again. It seems to be about the 5-6 year mark that I start getting sick of somewhere. So we did everything to that house. I decorated it again. I put ceramic tiles down in the hallway downstairs. Now this house was a really funny shape. It looked beautiful from the outside. So when you're driving up to the house, it looked absolutely beautiful. You know, brand new brick house, no houses attached to it on the sides. It looked like it looks like there's no houses attached, because when you drive up to it, you can see the front door, you see the windows, you know, it looks massive. And then when you drive past the house, you notice there's a house on the back end of it. So I had another house stuck to the back end of mine. And when I first moved there, people used to walk up to me as they saw me coming in and out the house. And they said, "Is that house big inside? Because it looks absolutely massive outside. It looks like a mansion." And it's not. It was very, very small on the upstairs, but downstairs was big. So you walk into the door and you've got the stairs right in front of you. Underneath the stairs was this giant bathroom, like with just one toilet and unnecessary like space. Then you had a huge kitchen diner and a huge living room on the other side. But upstairs it was like sardines. The bedrooms were a really stupid shape. I couldn't fit anything in there. It was awful. Anyway, we lived there for, I don't know, 6 years. And then I decided that we needed to move again. My two boys needed separate bedrooms because of their autism. So we found this house. And I think I'm going to run out of cross-stitch footage to tell you the story. Excuse me. Let me just have a break quickly, because I need to clear my throat. Okay, so we then fast forward, say we move into this house. I actually found it again through the Facebook group, and it was actually pretty simple. At first I found this house, well, the person saw my house because it was easier to move from my house on the outskirts of town than the original house, because it was in a really sought after area. So, and I'd obviously taken care of the house. Anyway, we saw pictures of this house at first, and my partner said absolutely not. Like, he didn't even want to go and look at it at first. He said, "I can see mold on the walls, the house is a tip, I can't see anything," like, because there was so much mess everywhere. Excuse me. So we left it for a while, and then I kept thinking about this house, and it's a house that's identical to my nan's, and she lives round the corner from this. And this is an area that I always was around when I was a child, and I always wanted to live in a house like this. The gardens are huge. It has a shed, like a brick shed outside. These houses are really old. They're made from brick, and they're really solid houses. So I had always, when I was younger, always dreamed about living in an area like this, because it's not a council estate. It's most of the houses here are owned. They're not even privately rented. They're owned, like been bought out and stuff like that. So to find a council house here is very, very rare. And it had a dining room, which is what we needed, because we needed to convert the dining room into another bedroom. So in the UK, if you're from the US, we don't have things like basements or anything like that. So in order to have an extra bedroom in a standard 3-bed house, you have to have some sort of dining room that you can convert into another bedroom. And if I'd have gone into a 4-bedroom house, the rent would have gone up like massively. I've had a friend that's moved into a 4-bedroom house so her kids could have separate rooms, and her rent is an awful lot more than mine. And the problem is with council, you're only allowed to stay in that house until you're no longer suited to it, which is understandable because obviously there is families out there, bigger families, that need the space. So when her children are older, they will then tell her to get out of that house and they'll put her somewhere else. And I was afraid of something like that happening because I don't want to have like all these memories in a house and then just be thrown out into a flat when the kids are gone. So there's different tenancies and all that type of stuff. I won't get into it now. They've changed. Anyone that goes onto the council list now, they assess your situation every 5 years or so. But because mine is an old tenancy, so when you move into a house, you take on the previous person's tenancy at that address. And I have a lifetime assured guaranteed tenancy. So that means that as long as I keep paying my rent here, they won't kick me out. But if I was to ever like not work or things like that, they would then say, come on, you need to go into a smaller house, because they done it with my dad and he doesn't work. But if he'd been paying his rent and not the government paying his rent, he could have stayed in his 3-bed. Anyway, so we moved into this house. So we decided to have another look at this house, and we came round. And yes, it was a tip. I knew it was going to be a lot of work. There was mess everywhere. I couldn't see anything. We went into the garden and it was all grown over. So I didn't really see the damage that the garden had. The garden had an awful lot of damage done to it. And it was things like the front garden. So the front garden, it was all overgrown. And when we got here, we discovered that there was a patio, like slabs for a driveway in the front, but it had all been overgrown. So it's just, if you can imagine that. So I wonder if I can put pictures in for you. Let me see if I can get a picture of the back garden. Okay, so that is just like a picture of the back garden. I won't leave it on too long, just because I don't want to distract people. But that's what the garden looked like when we moved in. Well, when we came to view it anyway. So this house was just in need of some real TLC. So I was very, very surprised that my partner said yes to move in here. When I looked around it, I was actually really like upset, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can take this on. There's so much work that needs to be done here. And when we left, he was the one that actually said, that house has got big potential, which I was so happy that he said that, because I didn't really want to move anywhere else. And the main drive for this house was the giant garden and the dining room. So we did it. We moved. It was just after COVID, so things took a little bit of a long time. We had to wait, I think it was 4 months or so before we could actually get in here. And because I'd seen the house, thank God, I started saving up a bit more than I'd already had. So I came here with about £4,000 in savings. Now that doesn't seem like much to people that own their own homes and things like that, but when you're not a homeowner and you haven't got a lot of money, that, to me, that was a lot of money at the time. So we moved in, and the first day we got here, we already had problems. I had my family help me, my good old family, because there's a couple of them that live around the corner. So my dad was obviously really happy that I moved here, because he lives around the corner, my nan lives around the corner, and a cousin that I'm close to, she lives around the corner. So they all helped me move in. And as we were putting stuff in, my cousin, that's really honest with me, came up to me as I was running around the house like crazy, putting things away, trying to get out of the people's way that were taking their stuff out. Because we had like a designated room. We put all our stuff in the living room while they put their stuff out the front door from every other room, just to keep it a bit organised. She came up to me and she said, I know that you ain't going to want to hear this, but I think you need to rip up all the carpets right now. And I said, well, what do you mean? Because obviously the house, they left their carpets here. She said, well, they're actually squishy. I was like, what do you mean the carpet's squishy? I hadn't noticed. I'd been, running around doing all sorts. And she said, Nadia, these carpets are wet. And I was like, right, okay. So she showed me and she was like, look, just lift up the side of that carpet. So we lifted it up, and it was disgusting. Basically, they'd had a dog in here, and you know the rest. So when we lifted it up, it turns out that they put cardboard underneath the carpet instead of what do you call it, the layer and stuff, insulation or whatever it is you call underlay. That's the word, underlay. Instead of putting actual underlay under the carpet, they decided to put cardboard. Now, because the dog was doing its business in the room, that cardboard had been absorbed. So, bless her heart, my cousin, she was like, move your boxes out of this room. We are taking this up. So her and her girlfriend pulled this carpet up, and she was like gagging, and I was like, Sam, you need a mask, get some gloves. And she's like, nope, I'm just doing it. So she pulled it all up, and I was like, oh my god. So then we ended up with no carpets. Then we went to the stairs, and we realised the stairs was exactly the same. So we had to pull the stairs carpet up. So my partner was ripping the stairs carpet up because he was so annoyed. In the end, that day, I ended up going to get some Crocs from Aldi's down the road, because the floors were just pure concrete, and I had children here, so I went and bought everybody a set of Crocs. And yeah, we did so much work to this house. For the first year that I was here, I was non-stop painting, sanding, decorating, gardening. At first, we were going to leave the garden for the first year and focus on the house. But we moved in June, and the weather was so good that I ended up out there. And I was doing like days from 6 a.m. in the morning. I'd be out there chopping back weeds and whatever else was out there. And I'd be out there till 6 o'clock at night. So we'd be doing 12 hours of work in the garden. I made a lovely friend that was a handyman called Kev. We used to call him my mate Kev. And without him, I would have never been able to shift all the rubbish that came out of that back garden. He chopped down 2 trees for me because the back garden actually had an apple tree and a plum tree in the back, but they'd been overgrown by ivy, so they were all rotten, and I was so paranoid that they were going to fall down. There was no fence. Once we'd taken back all the plants, we actually figured out that there was no fence on one side, which was my side, so I needed to replace it. There was things like a pasting table put up, like there was a makeshift fence, and someone had put like a pasting table that you do your wallpaper in on as a fence. So the neighbours were ecstatic when I put a new fence up. That was half of my money gone. The $4,000 that I came here, half of it went on a fence. So it was absolutely nuts. And then the year after that, we put a patio down, myself and my dad. Without my dad, I wouldn't have been able to have done half the stuff that we did in this house. The hallway stairs has got such a giant ceiling that I refused to paint it, and he got up there and was balancing on 2 ladders, painting it for me, and it's been a ride. It definitely has, but there's more to be done in this house. The kitchen is the only room I don't like, and I think after the year of constant painting and decorating and fixing and sanding and all of that type of stuff, I got sick of it. We also found out that there was a toilet in the shed. There used to be a toilet in the shed. And that was the reason why the woman was moving, because there's only one toilet in this house and it's upstairs. And I said to her, are you sure there was never a toilet in the shed? Because these old houses used to have an outside toilet. And she said, no, absolutely not. Anyway, we found it. It was there. As soon as I moved in, I see the pipes, and I was like, well, there was a toilet here, but okay. And my brother-in-law cleaned all the pipes out underneath the house, like the drainage, and put a new toilet in there for me. So now we've got an emergency toilet because there's only one upstairs. There is no downstairs loo. So yeah, it's been a challenge. As I said, the only room I hate is the kitchen. It's a very skinny, long kitchen. I think what I'll do is I'll put some pictures at the end of this for you so you can see what I've done to the garden. Probably I think I've got some pictures of the garden on my phone somewhere, but it's been such a I don't know, I have poured money into this house, and now there's rooms that still need doing. I think I'm just worn out from it and I don't want to do it. We suffer a lot with mold in this house, which I knew coming in here we would, because it's an old house. Which is fine. I can manage that. I've got like dehumidifiers, and I clean like the walls and the windows often, so I can keep on top of that. But I'm at a point now where I just can't be bothered to do anymore. But I do love being here. I mean, I moan about this house all the time sometimes, but I love being here. I feel I've never felt at home in any of my houses before, but this feels like home to me. It's a weird thing to explain, but whenever I've been in one of my old houses, it's never felt like home to me. Yeah, it's strange. And now my daughter's not here, we don't need this dining room as a bedroom anymore, which is why it's now my craft room. And I've never had my own space like this before, so it's lovely. But at the same time, you know, if she wanted to come back, I would instantly get rid of all of this and she would come back. But I don't know. I mean, I think my kids found it hard to adjust here. Because obviously I felt really bad moving them away from all of their friends and things like that. But I don't think I'll be moving anymore. I think that's it. I'm done. I am staying here now. I've got the garden at a manageable state now, where it won't get overgrown. You know, all the trees are gone. As I said, this guy Kev, my mate Kev, he cut down all the dangerous trees for me. And the neighbours here are lovely. There's a neighbour right on the left side of me, Peter. He's absolutely lovely. He'll help out with anything. And the other side just kind of keep themselves to themselves. You know, like it's a really lovely place to live, and I do feel safe here. So I am glad that we've done it, although it still needs a lot of work. So the kitchen is a very narrow room, and because of the council's safety rules, I can't have my cooker where I want it. It has to be on one side of the room, like with a cupboard each side of it. But I've got no top shelf cupboard, so I've got like literally nowhere to put anything in the kitchen, and that's what bothers me the most. And I'm not allowed to put any shelving up because of where the oven is. Like I'm not allowed to put them over the top of the oven because of their fire safety issues. The cooker used to be up against a wall near the back door, which is where my nan's is in her house, because hers is the same layout, but they actually moved it because of fire safety. So now it's like plonked in the middle of the kitchen, and it's awful. It really is. I mean, if it was me, I'd get rid of the back door completely and have like a wraparound kitchen. Excuse me. I'd have like cupboards all the way around, and then the cooker right where the back door is. So it's in the middle of that wall, and cupboards on either side of it and things like that. Because I've got 3 doors that come in and out of this house. I've got one in the kitchen, one in the living room, which I really don't like, and one as a front door. I would really, really happily prefer to get rid of the door in the living room, because it makes the living room cold and I don't use it. And it just makes everybody else be able to see straight through to my living room, because I've got a house on the back of me. And I hate it. So if I owned this house, I would do a lot to it. But because it's council, there's only so much I can do. I can't block up that door. I can't knock a wall out, because if I probably owned this house, I would knock a wall that connects the living room to the kitchen and just have one big room. Or I would extend it a little bit, the kitchen, like extend the wall out a little bit and then have a smaller living room or something like that. But I can't do any of this because it's not my house. The neighbour is actually private renting, and I've noticed that they have extended their outside of their house into the kitchen, and they've also knocked that wall down that I was saying that connects the kitchen to the living room. And that's what they've done, and they've got a massive kitchen diner, and then they use the dining room as the living room. So that is probably something that I would do, because then they use that door that leads to the back garden that was originally the living room. They use that as their door to go in and out from their kitchen, if that makes sense. So I don't know, but I'm happy I'm here, and I'm grateful that I pay low rent and things like that, and I don't have to worry about moving out. So swings and roundabouts, you know, I'm really happy. So thank you very much for listening to my rant. And sorry I have to keep clearing my throat. I don't know what's up with me. Every time I do these things, I end up with a frog in my throat. So I will leave you now with, I think we've got about a minute left. And I hope you've enjoyed this stitch with me. I hope the camera is clearer. If there's anything else you need me to look at, maybe the music volume or my volume, let me know in the next stitch with me. And fingers crossed, we should be ready to go soon enough with the Tomb Raider chart. So I will see you all next time. Thank you for listening to me rant and my story time. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye.